Welcome to The Real Dope, a podcast for anyone walking alongside someone battling addiction, based on the powerful book, The Real Dope on Dealing with an Addict, by sisters Elizabeth Brand and Meridith Elliott Powell. Each episode will explore practical strategies, share authentic stories, and provide the honest guidance. Let's begin today's journey and turn survival into strength.
Welcome to the episode of the Real Dope podcast. This is the show where we talk about and discuss everything that you need to know to actually deal with the disease of addiction in your life. Not you as the addict. Nope. This is a show for us, the enablers. I'm hanging out here with my sister, Beth Brand. And today's topic I'm super excited about because we're gonna basically break apart this whole terminology of enabler, figuring out whether you are an enabler, what an enabler actually is, and what the impact of enabling actually not only does to the addict, but does to you as an individual. Now, it is important, always we mention the fact that we are not therapists.
Yeah.
We are just people like you who have lived the journey, who have loved addicts, dealt with addicts, and had to feel the impact of what an addict can do to your life and how they can interfere with your life. But let's get back to who we talk about on this show, because who we talk about is not the addict. We talk about you. And today we're going to talk about the terminology, the definition, the word enabling. So, Beth, I think it's a really good place to start. What do we mean by enabling? What is an enabler?
Well, just listening to your introduction there, I started to think, we learn how to deal with the addiction and with the person who's suffering with the addiction. But ultimately, what we learned was how to deal with ourselves.
Yeah.
Because we ended up being as much of the problem as the person who's addicted. And that's truth. And I think that's where you start with enabling. I think when you think back to Melody Beattie's book on codependence, a lot of time those terms codependence and enabling are used as the same thing. And maybe they are, but we chose enabling because it speaks to our activity outside the addiction. Codependence is codependence between you and the addiction. And enabling, I don't know about you, but I don't need an addiction for my enabling personality to come about. I see it in all kinds of things I do.
It's interesting. So just this morning, I was talking with a friend whose son has gone into rehab for the third time. And it's funny that everybody swimming around him thinks he has the problem.
Mm-hmm.
And it was I'm not there to judge or to say anything because they're not ready for conversation of open to that. They're still on their own path. But I was listening to it. I was thinking about the show today because I was thinking about they don't even realize how much of a disease they have.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you just said that really well, that you could take every addict out of my life and I still have the disease of enabling. And I don't know until we wrote the book that I ever really heard enabling defined as a disease.
Mm-hmm. No, I don't know. And I don't know. I mean, we were lucky in that in some of our speaking gigs, we actually met addiction counselors who were still advertising themselves as addiction counselors because families didn't know that they had a problem. But what their real practice was about was helping the family.
Right.
Because that's just not something that's talked about. You can't even blame people for not knowing because nobody talks about what you do to keep that addiction going. Or even, as we both proved, even when all that addiction is out of your life, your patterns of controlling other people, which is what I think enabling is. It's the need to control the situation and to stick your nose in where it doesn't belong in other people's lives. And that person does not have to be an addict, and the situation does not have to be dire for me to, especially when I'm just in a bad place, to feel the need to control. Like I always have to drive when I'm in a bad place. And it's a big practice for me to let someone else drive.
Yeah, and I think that it's, like we see it a lot with parents today, right? I mean, that you don't want your children to suffer, so you get in their path. You get in their path and you try to remove any type of obstacle. That's a form of enabling. And I think it's partly you're trying so hard to make sure that you don't have to feel any kind of pain or anything. So what just hit me was that it's kind of like enabling is a form of numbness, like alcohol or drugs are a form of numbness to the addict. Because if I could just keep those in my life from drinking or from taking drugs, then I would be okay.
But just like addiction freezes your addict, enabling freezes you. You stop living your life. You live to control the addiction. And then eventually the addiction ends up controlling you, just like with the addict lives to get high. And eventually the high controls their whole life. It's
So so I was thinking about this. This is interesting to me. Is that why is it so hard to let go? I mean, I could see why we continue to enable because if it works, but it doesn't work. So the whole idea of, I mean, examples of enabling, um, my husband drinks too much and he can't wake up to go to work the next day. So I call the office and I make an excuse for him, say he's got, terrible thing of flu. He goes to jail for drunk driving. I bail him out. He, can't afford a place to live. So I pay for him for a place to live. I mean, there's just a million years. I'm worried he's not eating. So I bring dinner home every night. I mean, there's so many forms of enabling, but it doesn't work. Every time I enabled my addict, the behavior went another level and got worse. And why do we continue to enable when there's no positive reinforcement for it?
Well, I think that you think your life is going a certain way. They say the stronger you are, like in life, the stronger your personality, which is probably why you and I did this 5 times. The stronger your personality and the more strength you have in yourself, the more likely you are to enable because you think you can control it. You think it's gonna be different. And one thing that we did write about in the book that was kind of an epiphany, they have the same behavior. They're completely predictable. Completely. Once the addiction has taken over the person you love, the personality is completely predictable. Their actions are completely predictable. But we keep trying to make them something they're not. It's resistance. We have resistance to what is. And the more powerful you are and the more successful you are, you think you can control this part of your life as well. And you
Yeah,
just don't see the failure. I mean, nobody points that out or encourages you. Society encourages you to do the opposite, to help.
yeah,
And you're a bad person if you don't.
yeah. I also think I got a dopamine hit.
Mm.
I mean, like, if I think about the worst time I ever interfered with my husband's addiction, and there were a lot that I interfered, but the worst was when he came home from the hospital and he was determined to get healthy. And he told me he wanted his life back. He couldn't believe he'd done this to his life and he wanted to get sober. And then the next day he joined a gym, and I was so afraid that he didn't have a job. How was he gonna pay for the gym membership? That I went down there and I paid his gym membership for a year, and he never went back to the gym ever again. And within a couple of months, he was drinking. But I like that gave me a hit to pay. It was like, "Okay, phew, now he'll go to the gym. If I just
Mhm.
pay for it, then he'll go to the gym." And I didn't realize I was reinforcing the message in his head that he wasn't good enough or he couldn't get better. I was
He
like,
couldn't do it.
he couldn't do it. Like, if you
You didn't have any faith in him,
right.
and you
Like,
didn't.
and I didn't. Understandably,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, that wasn't out of nowhere.
yeah.
But I would say that I stepped into that marriage having no faith in him.
Mhm.
That I was
I would say the same thing.
that I showed up with the disease of enabling, before he ever came into my life. How do you start to know if you're enabler? And how do we get people to understand that, for lack of a better way to put it, I don't wanna that enabling, I'm gonna say it's bad, but maybe that's not the right terminology, but you're not how do we get people to understand
Well,
that that
first of all,
behavior.
you really are not helping the other person, and you are killing yourself. You are just as diseased, and you need to quit judging that person and start looking at your own behavior. But one thing that, made me laugh, Meredith, as much of an enabler as our own mother was, there are little signs along the way. People point things out along the way, and one thing mother said to me was, "I don't want you to be this unhappy when you're 40." And I was 37 when I left. And she could see it in me. She couldn't see it in herself, but she could see it in me, that my whole life was making sure that my world was safe. In fact, Meredith, even at my, wedding to Edward, I planned the whole wedding so that nobody would have to drink or drive because I was so nervous about all the people in our family and Edward, getting into a car,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's controlling. So I think you just start to notice that your life is being consumed.
Yeah. I also think you start to notice, like, to start to take notice of how much you lie.
Mhm.
I think that's like, and you think like you're lying, like it doesn't really count because it's quote unquote good lying. Like
Yeah,
I'm trying to, I remember like mother telling me daddy wrecked the car and 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 he had come in the house. I was the only child living at home at the time, and he was pretty intoxicated, and I was in bed, and I'd heard them kinda have a tussle about it, and the next day, she told me that somebody'd hit his car downtown.
yeah.
Like, she didn't want like, so the lie was good, right? She didn't
Mhm,
want me to know that my father had been out drinking and had wrecked
mm,
the car or whatever, but how much you lie, I think, is when you start to notice that everything like, you cancel out of a party because of this or that, or you always have a reason that like, or if your significant other isn't with you, there's some kind of, I would always say, "Doug's working," or
mhm.
or he's in Asheville, working on his pottery. He never was. I mean, he was home drunk, but I didn't wanna tell the truth,
Mhm.
you know? So I think that's a really sure sign that you're an enabler.
Yeah, I think something that really helped me, and I didn't realize anything about myself, like I said on the last pod, I was, like, thinking, "Where did I go wrong here?" Because I really couldn't figure it out, um, was journaling, and I'm not a big journaler, I never have been, I wish I were, I think it's great, but I'm just not, but I definitely started keeping a journal, and so in the moment, everything would seem normal to me, but when I would go back and read later, like a week later, what I thought or what I felt or what was going on in our lives, seeing it in black and white showed me how weird it was. It helped me get out of myself so I could see my behaviors better. So even if you think like everything's peachy, but you're nervous and this isn't a great life and you don't know what to do, I would suggest just starting to just write a day in the life down every now and then when things happen, and then go back and look and say, "Is this me? Is this authentic me, or am I reacting, or is the disease controlling me?"
I think that's a great suggestion. I also think that another thing that you can do is to really just you had given me this advice, is to act like you're looking at the behavior as if you were
Mhm,
somebody else. Just like you said, mother could see it in you, but
mhm,
she couldn't see it in herself. Like, would you give this advice to a friend? Would you tell a friend to, for the, 3rd time in a row to cancel, a vacation because, of this and that? Would you tell a friend to keep calling in and telling, your significant others, that work is that they're sick or things, like that, that
is this the what you're doing, the advice that you'd give to somebody else?
yeah, I
Mhm,
think you can start to see that, behavior in yourself. I don't know that I have ever had as much anxiety and as much stress. Physically, I was in really bad shape when I was deep in the throes of
mhm,
enabling, probably the worst physical shape, of my life. I had really bad, migraines. I had really bad skin. I struggled really badly with my weight. I didn't sleep, very well, at all. I remember I used to have to get up in the middle of the night. I would wake up and I would have to eat a peanut butter bagel and drink a glass of milk, and it was the only way that I could go back to sleep.
mhm,
And so I think the other is that when you start to see physical signs, in yourself, I think is another way to know, because that stress really eats you inside out. I mean,
mhm,
it is a constant battle to try to keep, all the ducks in a row. through enabling, I was trying so hard to hide my life too, which was a big stressor.
I'm thinking too, even if you don't wanna journal, if you just make bullet list of everything you did that day and notice how much of your day was taken up by the addiction,
I
by by
agree.
by covering your path, by, when you lied and
Mhm.
when you, had to transfer money from one place to another, and when you, couldn't focus at work because you were thinking, "Oh my god, what's the next shoe that's gonna drop when I get home?" And that yeah, and so the enabling part, though, is the controlling part, is all the things you do in a day to try to keep things okay, or, yeah, or try to keep the status quo, even though the status quo is gonna bust. It's only gonna get worse, it's not gonna get better until it does.
Where do you go and how do you start to come out of enabling mode?
Well, I don't know, I think it is like addiction in that I don't think you ever are cured, do you?
Mm-mm. The biggest wake up call to me was I'll never forget this too, that my husband now, he had been at at work all day and he'd had patients had backed up and he was behind and we were supposed to be at a dinner party and he came through the door 5 minutes before we were supposed to leave. Now, my husband's bald. It taking a shower and getting dressed takes maybe 3.
Mhm.
But I was so mad at him, like, the anger in me was so mad because I had us set to leave at a quarter till 7, and intellectually, I could understand that my husband had been seeing patients, he'd been at work, this had nothing to do
And
with
it didn't matter if you were late for the
it
party.
didn't matter if we were
Yeah.
late, but even if we were, I mean,
Mhm,
that's a really good reason to be
mhm.
but I had all the same feelings as if he drunk a fifth of vodka and charged 3 credit cards.
Yeah,
Like, that was when I realized that I really had a problem that had nothing to do with the addict in my life.
yeah. So I would say it was a lot of, uh but the thing is that you learn to realize it. You learn to see it. Like, I can see it, and I
Yeah,
can say to my current husband, to Peter, um, "I am feeling anxious."
right.
You know, I can practice not feeling anxious, or you can just let me, like, control the situation for a moment, and then I'll feel better. But I see it in myself, and I know to blame me. It's not him, it's me.
Yeah,
And that helps. But I think you learn it from, going to Al-Anon and seeing meeting other people who are starting to take responsibility for their own behavior like you are, and I think a lot of therapy helped. The other thing that helped was, dating. Like, I dated a lot of guys before, because it was years before I got married again, and I just learned something from each one, and I watched my behavior in each relationship, and I got better and better at not controlling, trying to control the relationship of the person and accepting the other person for who they were, not trying to form them into somebody I wanted them to be, which is what you do when you're enabling. You keep trying to control the situation, trying to make the person who you want them to be, not allowing them to be the adult they are or the
yeah,
person they are.
yeah. I
You're
think the other thing you need is very truthful and supportive people around you who will tell you the truth, who will help you wake up. Like, I remember, my friend Sue, that when I met Rob, and things I was worried about was that he wasn't very tall and that he was older than I was, and she said, "It's really interesting that the 2 things you're worried about are the 2 things you can't control."
yeah.
It was very good feedback and a very good thought of, "Wow, like, I'm about to block everything because I want to change things that are irrelevant, and I want to change things that cannot be." Like, that's where my focus went, to controlling what I could not control, which I think is a big sign of enabling, right?
Mhm.
Enabling, you're trying to control situations, but you're really attracted to controlling what you can't control.
What do you think we get out of enabling?
I think we get a hit. I think that we get it allows us to not deal with the things that we really need to deal with in our lives. Like, Rob and I were
Yeah.
talking this morning about anger and about, uh irrational anger. Like I was talking about when we took mother to the Flat Rock Playhouse, and she got so mad because they played Hispanic music, and she got up and she walked out because she was so mad about illegal immigrants. And it was so irrational. It
Yeah.
was like it had nothing to do with what she was saying, and the thing was, it was
By the way,
displacement.
just for the listeners, our mother did have dementia, so
Yeah, right.
this is where that's coming from.
But,
Yeah.
well, but even to me, like, she got so mad, like, at things she didn't mean or things whatever because she could not be mad at
But
the addict,
yeah,
right?
yeah, Teddy.
So she was looking for something she could control, and in
Mhm.
that situation, it was looking for something to blame and something to be mad at because she didn't wanna go home and deal with the fact that she had ignored the signs that her son was an addict, and she dug a hole so deep she could not get out of. And so what I think we get out of enabling is I think we get to be a hero, we get to blame, we get to be a victim, and then we get to ignore our role in how we got there. That's probably
Mhm.
the most succinct way is we get to ignore our role in how we got into this situation.
The other insight our mother gave us into my first marriage was, that I married Edward because I could control him, because he
Mhm.
was weak and controllable, and I think that that was probably true. I was better in the world than he was.
Yeah,
And it was funny, so when I met Peter and, we were planning, like, our first vacation together, and he actually planned the vacation, and he carried my bags to the car, it was really freaky and hard for me because I had no control. I had
right,
no control. I was used to doing everything, and I knew I could do everything because I knew Edward was going to do nothing.
right.
And so I kinda like you said, you get a hit from that. Not only you get a hit, I like and I don't know if this is too woo-woo for this podcast, but feel like the Enneagram really helped both of us.
Yes, I would experience that
See,
too.
because learning our personality types, Meredith's an 8 and I'm a 6, um, we could see our motivation behind our need to enable or whatever we were doing. And yeah, and the control for both of us was coming from different places, that need to control.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that you definitely seek it out. I think there's such a high in controlling everything.
Well, why was Edward attractive to me?
Right,
Instead of I had plenty of other boyfriends in DC with, like, jobs and lives and things like that, but I that would have been a partnership. That would have
right.
been intimacy, right? That would
Yeah,
have been and so this way I could be, you know, king of all I could see and do. Yeah. And that was a lesson learned in the second marriage was partnership.
do you think that if you love an addict, you live with an addict, you're automatically an enabler?
Um, no, I don't think so. I mean, I think some people are like, we have a long hit. We learned this. And I was even thinking, Meredith, I was even thinking about, how everyone asks us, well, why did the boys suffer this way and why did the girls not? Well, I think it's how we were raised.
Yeah,
I think as a boy, you become an alcoholic in our family. And as a girl, you become an enabler.
right.
Just like the boys did the yard work and we set the table.
Mhm.
And that's it just hit me the other day, and I thought that's what we were raised to do. So, I think some people go innocently into addictive situations, relationships with addicts. So, I don't know, but if you stay in one, yeah, you're an enabler.
I think it's really difficult not to be, and I think you said it so well, I think it's a big part of the attraction,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
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 and even if it's not, if you get into a relationship where addiction is a main player, you are gonna end if you stay in that, you are going to end up enabling, because that's the dance you do, right?
right.
That's what keeps everything going and okay until it's not okay.
So, as we wrap up this episode, what is your biggest piece of advice for an enabler out there? If you could tell them to do one thing, what would that be?
I tell them just to start with noticing how much time you spend on the addiction every day. And then I would tell them 2 things. I don't have just one thing. And then I would practice letting go in areas of your life where you're comfortable doing it, not harmful, like, maybe not changing out the toilet paper roll or maybe not, um, cleaning up completely after dinner or something like that, just to practice how it feels not to control a situation. Something like that. I don't know. Or not like, I don't know about you, but I feel responsible for everything and everyone. Like,
Yes.
when you have a party or something, and maybe just letting that go, like letting someone else go get their drink, not, just little things like that.
Yeah, just taking baby steps.
Mm,
And I would say that the one thing I want people to take from this episode is because you'll hear us talk a lot more about it, is to understand that enabling is a disease. That in all honesty, for the addict to heal, you have to heal. And for you to heal, either the addict has to heal, or you have to wrap your hands around your disease, because if not, you're just going to replace one addict with another, or one need or one situation you're controlling with another situation to control.
that is true.
So any thoughts on what any passions for next week? If you don't have one,
I
I have one.
kind of do, Meredith.
Okay.
I kind of want to talk about those, how predictable people suffering with addiction are. Because I think you need to understand that I was I was listening to a news show and they were talking about somebody suffering with addiction and they're like, "Oh, he's chaotic, he's so unpredictable." And I thought, "No, he's absolutely predictable." And I think when you know that, the craziness of your enabling really shines through. So yeah, so that's what I would like to talk about if you would like to talk about it.
Sounds good to me, because I think the other thing that goes with that is that not only are they predictable, but just when you think it cannot get any worse, it can go another level. This is
Exactly.
beyond your imagination.
Yeah.
So tune back right here with us next week. We're going to talk about just how predictable the behavior is, and when you understand that, how much that is going to take the chaos out of your life. And you're going to want to tune in for some crazy stories about just how low life with an addict can go. All right. We'll see you right back here next week for
Bye.
another episode of the Real Dope Podcast. Bye.
Bye.